What role is Europe hoping China to play on the international stage? Several European leaders have said that decoupling with China is the wrong answer. As mentioned in the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, the world is facing rapid changes, which are described by many as changes unseen in a century. It's perhaps time for the world to pause and ponder what's the solution for this uncertainty and transformation we're all facing, and what can China offer as solutions. Earlier, I sat down with George Papandreou, former Prime Minister of Greece and President of Socialist International. He expounded on the answer with a European perspective. Let's take a listen. We know that you're actually very active on social media. You have an Instagram account, and very recently you posted a picture of you and and your dog, which is Google translated to be named Crazy. I don't know whether that is correct or not. What do you want to achieve with being active on social media like that?
Well, I am active. First of all, it's a pleasure to be on your program, Mrs. Jing, and I have been active, of course, and will continue to be active. And I think that's a duty, whether you are in politics or even just a simple, normal citizen, if you like. That is a tradition we have in Greece. So I believe very much that we need to take care of our environment, of our animal life. We have seen how much we rely on our animals, but also how much we are destroying, unluckily, our environment, our wildlife. There was a report that something like 60–70% of our wildlife has been destroyed over the past decades. But of course, I love our dog, and the word "crazy" in Greek also means
Is it really named
yes,
Crazy?
because in Greece when we say crazy, it means we go crazy over something, like we're
I
really
see.
happy about something. So she makes us happy.
We've actually been hearing these comments from European leaders. For instance, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, Mr. Scholz was talking about decoupling with China is the wrong answer. European Trade Commissioner Mr. Dombrovskis said that decoupling from China is not an option. I mean, what prompted these leaders to come to the realization that this is not the answer, despite political pressure from some other country to say, you know, don't trade with China, don't transfer technology, or China is this and that? What do you think made the realization more crystallized?
In this geopolitical atmosphere of polarization, there is a strong polarization now between the United States and China, which we see. We are worried about that in Europe. I think we would like to see much more dialogue and much more cooperation in as many areas as possible. I know there will be there is competition, but there also is the concept of putting guardrails around around this relationship to make it a peaceful competition in some areas, a rivalry but peaceful, but then also areas of cooperation. Climate crisis is all of us. We had the pandemic. Health could be a peace building area for all of us.
How do you see the implication of this ever escalating tech race that the United States is seeing with China, although China does not see it this way, but the United States is ramping up the stakes in this competition and bringing European businesses along?
Well, I understand that technology is one of the areas where the future competition and rivalry will be, as technology we have seen in our lives, and not only in our lives. Technology is something which is very powerful, and has huge potential. However, it has huge potential for both good and huge potential for bad. For example, we just talked about weapons of mass destruction and nuclear weapons. The nuclear has obviously huge potential, but it can be used in the worst. But I think rather than a rivalry around technology, we have to sit down together and decide some rules about how we use this amazing power in order to use it for the good of humanity, for the good of human beings. And that we both, or all of us, whoever have this amazing power, um, we use it in the best of ways. If I go back to ancient Greece, um, the the um, the whole issue was how leaders use their power, and if you abuse your power, it was anathema to the gods. You would be punished by the ancient gods.
Mm.
Uh, so the whole idea of how we use power, I think, is the moral dilemma we have. So I would like to see the U.S. and China and others, of course, sit down and talk about weapons of mass destruction, how these new, data, big data, and how we make sure it's used correctly. Artificial intelligence, the issue of robotics, new biotechnologies, which may change even the nature of human beings. These are a huge potential, possibly to help our health or our growth or our development, green development,
Yeah.
but it also could be used in a military or ways, cyber attacks and so on. So I think this is where we really need to work together. I don't see rivalry as a solution. I see cooperation and honest discussions so that for the benefit of our peoples.
You were talking about democracy, and just now you brought up your Greek tradition, Greek philosophy. Of course, democracy is a very important tradition, a very important idea. You expounded on it on many occasions. I guess this is one of the points where China and some Western countries, some Western analysts have very sharp differences about. Of course, you have your idea, your understanding of what democracy is, and China says, we have our rights to pursue our way of democracy. We are delivering what democracy is designed to achieve, although not necessarily through the same approach that the West is now taking. How do you look at that, given that you have a very strong how do you say, penchant towards spreading the idea of democracy. You even want to have a globalized democracy. How do you look at China's insistence on finding its path of democracy towards an ideal goal in its own vision?
There are differences as to how we see democracy. Uh, But again, I do not want to see democracy or the concept of democracy militarized. Uh, Whenever anyone tried to impose a system on someone else, I think we have failed or made things worse. Let me put it that way. But why not discuss it? Why not debate it? Why not exchange views on how we see our governances and in an open and honest way? Uh, I go back again to ancient Greece. Of course, there is no perfect system. I believe we are always trying to construct better and better societies, and we need to be honest on our failings, but also on our achievements. And in ancient Greece, what they had was that first of all, democracy was something that uh, came out of long tradition of understanding, and as a matter of fact, the oldest book in Western history, the Iliad, written by Homer, which is about a war, a terrible war of many years, of 10 years. Uh, this was being taught in the schools of ancient Greece all the time. And what it did in the end, it became an anti-war story. And people started saying, well, we have to find ways to solve conflicts without war. And one of the ways is democracy, which means what? That we can debate issues, we can have different views, but we will not use violence to solve our problems. So this is one of the reasons why democracy developed. And another one was, of course, there was a feeling that okay, we as peoples can actually have we can have our fate in our own hands, if you like. And if we do that, that means we need to have better education. That means we need to have better health. So it developed theater and arts and music and math and science and games. The Olympic Games, of course, too, which were also the basic for the Olympic Games, were to promote peace. So I see that this is an important thing. But I also would like to say that, of course, in ancient Greece, they had many different forms of democracy. They experimented a lot. And that's so one. It's interesting to go back and see that one can learn from these experiments. Aristotle said, for example, that democracies cannot survive if there is high inequality. Well, in many parts of the West, we have huge inequality, and that I think is undermining our democracies. So we have a lot to do to change our democracies to make them much better. There were other forms where citizens were chosen by lottery to give their opinion, and then finally that would be after their opinions, after they would work on these ideas, then that would be maybe discussed to be turned into actual policy. But you cannot do that today, when not even in a small country like Greece,
No.
certainly not in China,
No.
with such a big country, you cannot all get into one
No.
square and discuss.
Right.
But with the internet, with technology, we could actually have citizens' voices discuss policies. And I tried to do this when I was prime minister. We called them wiki laws. So what we would do is, before we would make a decision on a law in parliament, we would put it on the web, get the views of our citizens, and then the cabinet would have to discuss these views before we made it into law. And it was very interesting. So I think we can do this if we use the right algorithms. We can actually use the internet to build up the possibility of citizens' views also having an important impact on our policies.
Well, definitely.
So these are many different ideas we can talk about. So my main point, I maybe have rambled on a bit on ancient Greece, and democracy. But my point of view is that these are very interesting ideas to discuss if we can be open and honest, rather than making this a wall between us.
Yeah. Finally, this year marks the 50th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and Greece. So would you like to say something about bilateral relations, and what else would you like to see develop between the two countries besides the people-to-people exchanges, especially between the youth that you just mentioned?
Yes. Well, of course, Greece and China have 50-year relationship, which has been a positive one and a growing one. And I think this is something we need to maintain and to build up. There has been, as I mentioned, of course, the cultural exchanges are very important. The exchanges, the people-to-people exchanges we have had. Well, COVID has, of course, been an unhappy recess, but we have had many Chinese come and visit our country, and many Greeks, of course, love to travel and meet Chinese in different parts of China and learn about the Chinese culture. So tourism is one area, but there are other forms of investment. Shipping, of course, has been very important for both countries, and trade. The port of Piraeus is now one of the bigger ports in the Mediterranean, and maybe soon one of the biggest, if not the biggest, in Europe, which just shows the possibilities for cooperation in so many areas. I believe also in health, the traditional health of acupuncture. My son actually has studied in China acupuncture and practices it on the island of Crete.
Great.
So, and we have our ancient remedies, but also our modern ones. So I think areas of health and as Greece has one of the highest biodiversities of Europe in herbs and fauna and so on. So these are areas I think where we could have many interesting areas of cooperation, and I look forward to that.
Thank you very much, George Papandreou, former Prime Minister of Greece. Thank you very much for accepting our interview.